Well, the massacre in Parkland, Florida last week has not surprisingly sparked a renewed push on the left to take guns away from American citizens. The new call is for a ban on so-called assault rifles. That's an intentionally imprecise term that includes AR-15s and a lot of other sporting rifles. Bans of any kind tend not to be popular, but Americans are so upset, many of them, by the school shootings, and rightly so, that they might be open to a ban if it promised to save lives. So the question is, would an assault weapons ban prevent future shootings? That's the key question, and luckily we don't need to guess about the answer. We already had an assault weapons ban in this country for 10 years, starting in 1994. Now, that law, when it was written, mandated a comprehensive study of its effectiveness, which was produced, so we have a definitive answer. According to the Justice Department, our assault weapons ban, the one that passed in 1994, had no effect on crime rates. None. Nobody was saved by it. That shouldn't be surprising if you know the numbers, because despite the hype, rifles are actually not the weapon of choice for the overwhelming majority of killers in America. In 2015, the most recent year for which we have data, rifles were used in a total of 252 homicides in America. By comparison, old-fashioned knives, sharpened metal, were used in more than 1,500 killings. Blunt objects killed 437. A striking 624 murders were committed with bare hands and feet. Those are the actual numbers on that from the government. So the science is in on this, and it's conclusive. And yet the very people who tell you they still believe in science and you don't care about the science in this case. They're still trying to ban AR-15s. A new piece of legislation called the Assault Weapons Ban of 2017, introduced last year by several Democratic senators, would outlaw the manufacture, the sale, or transfer of more than 200 different, quote, military-style assault weapons. What's a military-style assault weapon? Well, according to the law, it's any weapon that has features like a detachable magazine, a pistol grip, a forward grip, a folding stock, or the infamous barrel shroud, presumably named because its purpose is shrouded in mystery for the people who propose banning it. They have no idea what it is. Most of these are cosmetic features, by the way. They don't make firearms more deadly. They just make them look more scary, and that's enough. Let's stop pretending. None of this nonsense would reduce mass killings, no matter what they're telling you. The people pushing it don't even believe it would have that effect. And they'll admit that if you ask them, because it's impossible to deny it. Again, the numbers are in. The real problem they have, the thing that animates them, is loathing of the Second Amendment, which, like the First Amendment, they no longer believe in. They think you do not have a right to own a gun, and they're working hard to make sure you cannot own a gun. Their aim is not safety, it's control. Jumaane Williams is a New York City council member. He's running for New York Lieutenant Governor, and he joins us tonight. Councilman Williams, thanks for coming on.
Thanks for having me. I'm glad we decided it's a good time to talk about gun safety.
Yeah, it is a good time to talk about gun safety. I think it's always a good time. So we had an assault weapons ban, very much like the one that Democrats in the Senate are proposing. And we had it for 10 years. And we know, because it was studied exhaustively, that it saved no lives. So what would be the motive in reimposing that same law?
Well, also, I noticed on your data, you didn't put down that 90,000 Americans are shot, 30,000 killed by guns every single year. But the real question is
what percentage of those are suicides, by the way? Do you know?
So one, people like to put that out like it matters, but 2/3
Well, it does matter, actually.
Well, no, so we'll say
the majority were suicides.
2/3 are suicide, but that means 10,000 Americans are murdered. That's one. And two, which is
just don't use phony statistics. That's all I'm asking.
Two, which is critically important. All the data shows the presence of a gun increases a successful suicide percentage. So that's important.
That's true.
Those lives
so
matter.
You think suicide, just as a side note, since you're a liberal, I assume you're for assisted suicide. Well, you're suddenly against suicide when it's committed with a gun?
No,
or what's your position?
I just don't want to make sure. I want to make sure we're all clear, because I know your master of conflation is good, and I just want to make sure.
No, it's not. You can't say there are 30,000 gun deaths and not note that 2/3 were self-inflicted. I'm not for suicide, physician assisted or otherwise. I'm sure you are, but I just want to be clear with our viewers that you're misusing the stat.
I want to be clear and say that the lives that are lost of suicide also matter. And the 10,000 murders should be counted as well.
Look, I'm not for gun killing of any kind. My only point is, look, Legislators make laws, and they do so in the hope they will have their intended effect. And we know from 10 years of experience that an assault weapons ban doesn't work. There's no debate about that. The DOJ came to that conclusion after studying it. So why would we want it again? It's a simple question.
So, but actually the real question is, and it's always to you, Tucker, do you believe that we shouldn't have unfettered access to guns in this country? That's the question.
I don't know what that means. I don't live. I live in a world of specifics. I cover lawmakers who are trying to impose laws on the rest of us, and I try to assess whether those laws are wise and will be effective.
If we're both being honest and want to deal with the gun violence.
I am being honest.
And so what we have to start is a point of where people agree. And what I'm saying to you is, should we have unfettered access to guns in this country?
I don't even know what that means. We don't have unfettered access to guns.
Do.
Far from it. No, that's silly overstatement.
That's not silly at all. That's a question I'm trying to get to you so that we can have an honest conversation about what to do after we've agreed with that.
No, okay. So let's get, rather than get into this sort of airy world, let's get into the those words don't mean much. Let's get into the specifics of the legislation that the left, the Democratic Party, is pushing now. They are saying that guns that have something called a barrel shroud ought to be prohibited, outlawed, banned.
Again,
and my question is why? Why would a barrel shroud make a gun more dangerous? Do you know?
But again, that's the wrong question. The question
Why is it the wrong question? I'm responding to a proposal that you support.
Unfettered access to guns. That is what the question is. And what you do successfully, and it works, because you give people red meat, and the fans like it.
It's not about the fans or red meat. I'm responding to an actual piece of proposed legislation in the U.S. Congress proposed by your allies in the Democratic Party, and I'm asking you about the details of that legislation. It would propose banning guns that have pistol grips and barrel shrouds and bayonet lugs. Have there been a lot of mass killings with bayonets? What is this?
What you do well is focus on something, and I'll tell you something else.
Focus on facts, right. Yeah, that is kind of my strong suit.
But I want to focus on the real question, and you refuse to answer it. Is whether or not this country should have unfettered access to guns. And
well, but the answer, needless to say, is no. We don't allow 9-year-olds to have guns.
Thank you very much for that answer.
They're not currently allowed to have guns, nor have they ever been allowed.
That's a critically important answer.
Well, but it's not because there's no disagreement.
No, it is.
It's a straw man.
Then the question is, what should we do? Because when you look at something like a car that was made just to transport people and accidentally kills people, we have tremendous amount of regulations. You need insurance. You have to have training.
Our guns are tremendously regulated. I actually know quite a bit about
a gun that is made to kill people.
Are you
have to have training to purchase a gun in most of this country?
Are you willing to address the actual law proposed by actual Democrats in the actual U.S. Senate, or no? Or are you just going to...
The country that has 50% of all civilian guns in the world and is 4% of the population, are you willing to admit that that has something to do with the gun violence in this country?
It's a look, you're not. I'm dealing in the realm of social science and facts. But here's what we do agree on.
You're dealing in the realm of conflation, and you do that well.
I'm not conflating anything.
I want to start from here.
Both of us are opposed to school shootings.
Sure.
But I don't want to use. Look, the fact that you're unwilling to address the specifics of the legislation suggests to me that your real aim is not reducing gun violence, but something, I would say, hidden, maybe taking guns away from the population. That, I suspect, is probably your aim.
Well, the reason I'm running for lieutenant governor is because in New York City, I've been a leading voice among others in reducing gun violence just in the past year to 22%. What have you done to reduce gun violence in this country?
I don't know.
Exactly my point.
Look, I
and
don't think you can quite take credit for that,
You should be responsible.
Councilman.
No, you need to be responsible with the purse that you have.
I am responsible because I deal in facts and you deal in mindless generalizations that do nothing except get you votes.
The unfettered access to guns in this country.
It's a totally, I don't know who gave you that talking point, but you ought to fire him because it's beneath
an important talking point. And I look forward to your Twitter fans in just a few minutes. But there'll be a few people that always respond to me, and I'm happy because I came on the show, and I'm looking forward to working with them.
You know what? You want to get off Twitter and start doing something for the state of New York. Are you really hanging around on Twitter? You've got too much free time, man. Get off Twitter. I tell my kids that. I'll tell you that too.
I told you what I did, and I'm very proud of it.
I can tell you are. Thank you, Congressman.
Thank you.
Councilman, rather. Ooh, I just gave him a job boost. Dan Bongino, a former Secret Service agent, he joins us tonight. So there's a huge controversy online that I'm hesitant even to wade in on, but I think it needs to be addressed, and it's over the protests led by the students.
Sure.
For whom all of us feel terrible, because you can't imagine anything worse than your kid's school getting shot up. But all of a sudden you're seeing these kids involved in calls for very specific pieces of legislation. And the allegation has been that they are in some way in contact with organized anti-gun groups. And people who have suggested that have been denounced as immoral and heartless. And how dare you question these kids or attack them, which, for the record, I am certainly not doing.
Right.
But I think it raises interesting questions about how we make our law.
Right. You know, what's interesting about this is I'm with you 100%. If you are involved in a horrific, unimaginable tragedy like this, you absolutely, your voice should be heard. They are obviously important voices in what happened. But what I find ironic about it is a couple things. Number one, where I think their voices are most valuable, Tucker, are not on the components the media is paying attention to. In other words, supply side measures to get rid of guns.
Yes.
Where their voices would be valuable is where were the signs missed? These students were there. They dealt with this kid every day. But the media is focused more on a teenager's expertise in supply side control measures for guns, which, Tucker, let's be candid, they probably have not studied a very complicated, layered issue. They absolutely unequivocally have the right, and after what they've been through, we want to hear their voices. But the media is focusing on an agenda and not, ironically, where these kids could be most valuable.
Well, they're using these kids in a kind of moral blackmail where you're not allowed to disagree or you're attacking the child, which is, of course, I can speak for myself, the last thing I would ever do as a father of four.
Yeah.
You would never attack the kid. You can disagree with other people's opinions without attacking them, but the press is conflating that and making it like you're not allowed to disagree, you're a bad person.
Well, did you notice the doublespeak here as well? When it comes to things like immigration rights, they don't seek subject matter expertise from parents who've been killed by illegal immigrants. When it comes to things like the victims of terrorist attacks, their voices, no, to be candid here, I get it. They can say, someone may come back and say, well, Republicans come out and they say, what about Kate's law? Fine. But we gave them a voice, and we followed it up with a substantive law, and we understand, and I'm saying to you, these kids should be heard. But the left-leaning media will not do the same. They will give these kids a platform to talk about these legislative issues, but they won't give anyone else on an issue that doesn't fit their agenda the exact same platform.
You're totally right. Creepy propaganda outlets like CNN. I guess what I just disagree with is the idea that anybody who has an alternate view is removed from the conversation on moral grounds immediately. That is their play, always.
I mean, Tucker, it's all critical theory stuff. It's meant to minimize and put you. It wins the argument before the argument starts by making sure Tucker Carlson's a bad guy. Therefore, whatever Tucker Carlson says is therefore unworthy of the conversation.
Smart. That's such a smart. I wish I had expressed it as crisply as you just did. Thank you.
That's a big compliment.
That was good.
Brother. I appreciate
I was impressed.